Boom, I'm in the room. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Conversations regarding mental health. Now, you're here because there's nothing on the telly. And I'm here because I'm here. And I'm coming to you live from the old Heale Manor. And I'm Lord Heale, your host. Now, this evening, what we're going to talk about is I've got a guest on. Keep his fingers crossed that the mic's working. We're going to look at trauma and how trauma can affect somebody and how they can deal with it. So without too much further ado, let's bring in my guest. So Tina, good evening.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear
Boom,
me?
yes.
Yay! I'm so
That's a,
glad.
that's a result.
I am coming to you from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is close to Philadelphia, and so I'm just delighted to be on this show.
Fantastic. You're most welcome. Now, you're going to tell us all about the trauma that you've been through and
Right,
look at how you dealt with it. So,
right.
if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into it, and then I'll come back in and I'll grill you. I'll push you for some
Good.
more information.
I'm happy to be grilled. Happy.
The floor
Great.
is yours.
Thank you so much. I am a composer out of a classical music tradition. I have been writing music for almost 50 years now. And a year ago, I published a book called Let Your Heart Be Broken: Life and Music of a Classical Composer. And in it, I discuss my birth story, which had a secret in it that I wouldn't say changed my life, but really grabbed my attention. So I want to start, however, by reading a little bit about why I wrote this book, and the idea of let your heart be broken. What that means is, especially for mental health. What does that mean when I say let your heart be broken? I was at a conference with an author named Stephen Levine, and he did a lot of work with death and people who were dying. And he was a poet and a writer and wrote many, many books. And he was giving this conference, and somebody asked him, "What is the meaning of life?" And I think this has something to do with our subject to do. And he said, "Oh, I'm asked that all the time," he replies, "but I really don't know." He pauses, looking to the side, and turns back, smiling. "But I think the meaning of life is to let your heart be broken." And then I write, "The heart, the round sphere of your being, let your heart be broken. Allow, expect, look forward to the life you have so carefully protected and cared for, broken, cracked, rent in two. Heartbreakingly, your heart breaks, and in the two halves rocking on the table is revealed rich earth, moist, dark soil, ready for a new life to begin." So for me, that is definitely the life of trauma, that trauma breaks your heart. And for me, my experience is by facing my trauma, by walking through it, um, and using it creatively in my music, it it allowed me to sort of recreate myself in a better version.
Wow. So, what was your initial trauma? What was the thing that set you onto this?
Well, I always knew that I was born in Sweden and had lived in a foster home until I was 3.5 years. I lived in the southern part of Sweden in Malmö, And my foster mother was Solveig and my father was Torsten. And I had three brothers, foster brothers, the youngest of whom, I actually didn't realize this until much later, was almost my age. And we were brought up as twins for those 3.5 years that I lived with them. And then one day, a beautiful and American professor, she had just gotten her PhD from University of Pennsylvania. She came and lived in Malmo for maybe a, a month or so and adopted me, brought me back to America, where she met my stepfather and married. And then I became the oldest of five kids. So she had four. She had four children. And I always had this sense that even though I was loved and adored and never treated any differently, I had a real sense of disconnection. Um, I remember, for instance, they were talking about family stories, how my great 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 grandfather fought in the Revolution, American Revolution. And I thought, oh, I wish that were my grandfather. Now, these were just private thoughts that I had.
Mm.
And I knew that talking to my mother about my adoption was made her very unhappy. So I brought it up once, and she had such a look of horror on her face that I thought, oh, yeah, you know how kids are very instinctive. They're just like, okay, that's sudden. I shouldn't talk about that. So, and I was somewhat depressed as a child. I think when I looked back at it later in life, I realized I was quite profoundly depressed at certain times. And I would dissociate, something I didn't know I was doing, and dissociate really, I just wasn't present. If something was upsetting to me, I just couldn't hold on to myself. I don't know, I'd sort of step back like I was watching my life from like it was a TV
Mm.
screen. So, rather than being in it. So, but when I was 21, I happened to be back in Sweden taking care of a family friend of ours, a daughter of theirs. And I thought, I was there for 2 months and I thought, right at the end, like the last week, I said, maybe I'll go to the adoption agency. And so I called them up and they said, oh, we wouldn't have any records from you because you're an American citizen and we didn't handle Americans. And you couldn't be Swedish because we wouldn't allow Swedish children, even back in the 50s, to be adopted by
Mm.
foreigners. So I called the day before I left and I said, did you look in the archives? Did you get any information? They said, come down. We have information for you. And so I came down and she was sitting there reading a letter and she said, this is a letter from your birth mother. And she asked me a lot of questions about my life in America. And finally she said, your birth mother is you were adopted by your birth mother. Your your adopted mother is your birth mother. So that got me being really quiet for a while. I was I never would have guessed. Um, and so I traveled back and a week later was with my mother and told her about this. And she said, oh, I meant to tell you, but, and I was 21 at that point. I meant to tell
Mm.
you, but I couldn't find the right time. And, um, she did explain that, in the 50s, having an illegitimate child was very, very difficult. And it meant that um, you might not be able to get a job, or you might be discriminated against, or who knows, you would be the fallen woman.
Mm. Was
Um,
was your mother Swedish then?
no, she was
How how
American, but
how come you were born in Sweden?
well, I think my biological father had contacts in Sweden, and Sweden was considered a pretty progressive country. Where
Mm.
you maybe would be more accepted. And it turned out she had never told anyone. She hadn't told my stepfather. She hadn't told her mother. Um, And I think over the years, this very smart plan to disguise the birth of her child turned into a secret that had really severe consequences in our family. And that she started making choices around this secret. Rather, I think that's one of the problems with secrets, is that sometimes you have to make choices around them rather than to be sort of free. And she became, over the years, more and more paranoid that people would find out. And she didn't want people to know. She didn't want me to tell anybody that she was my birth mother. So it was a very strange situation. Um, but I went on with my music career. I was a composer. And when I was 30, I had a brand new daughter and I was holding her. And I realized I was really angry and that I hadn't really dealt with this. Um, and that I really needed to. Otherwise, I was going to sort of let it be part of my daughter's inheritance. It would come
Mm.
out in my behavior. I was angry. I was still depressed. I had severe depressions. And I realized I really needed to get myself into some sort of treatment, mental health treatment. Or I would just sort of it's Christmas time, wrapping up a package and putting on a bow on it and giving it to my daughter. And
Mm.
that really inspired me to start a very long process of talk therapy that really helped me get to the bottom of my grieving of the trauma. Because I want to say something else, and we talked about this before. I was a little Swedish girl in a Swedish family. They were my parents. Those were my brothers. And when I left, particularly without any explanation,
Mm.
it was as if, there was a terrible car accident or their house burned down. It was as if they disappeared. And one of the things that I found was that I had been grieving that loss since I was 3, but I didn't have words for it.
Mm. Did you ever meet back up with your first foster parents then?
Yes. I when I started realizing how important they were, I immediately asked my mother for information, and she said, "Oh, I don't have any." And then I actually called the international operator, and they found one of the siblings who had been born. I guess Solveig had been so overwhelmed with loss of me that she wanted to have another child immediately. So Solveig was born almost a year after I left. And when I called up, I said, "Oh, hi, I'm Tina from the US, and I used to live with you." And he said, "Oh, I have always heard about you." So, and it turned out this was almost 30 years after I had left, that she had died uh, 2 or 3 months before I called. So I had just
Mm.
missed her. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great shame.
Hmm.
But the rest of the family carried on talking about you after you'd
Yes,
left.
yes, yes. And I went back and I visited for a week. And then when my daughter was 10, so I went and lived for about a month in Sweden and saw my foster brother daily, and saw
Mm.
the family. Just wanted to reconnect with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about your birth father, your real father? Did you ever had any contact at all? Did you find him? Did
Well,
your mother let on?
in my mother's very weird, kind of secretive, odd way, when I was in high school, so I was 15, she said, "Oh, I think you should go to boarding school." And I said, "Oh, great. I want to study music," because I was a pianist at that point. And she said, "No, no, no, no. I want you to go to Philadelphia. I want you to go to this academic boarding school." and there will be this family who will look in on you. I said, okay. And then 2 years later, she said, actually, they would like you to live with them for the year. It will save a lot of money and you'll have a family. And while you finish the school, why don't you go live with them? They're old family friends. Um, so I did live with them for a year. And I would call up my mother and I'd say, Mom, Dr. Chance and his wife are fighting a lot. I don't quite understand it. Well, it turned out he was my father, my birth father. And I was
Ah,
living in the family for a year without knowing it. And it caused a lot of tension, of course,
mm,
in the marriage. Even though she had accepted it, she knew right from the beginning who
yeah.
I was. But I think the tension of me living there and not knowing again that it's a
Yeah,
very strange story.
you just thought your mother would have sort of tipped you the wink, if nothing else, or your father. He obviously knew who you
I
were.
obviously knew, and I write about it in the book. I write about, um, he said to me later he always wanted to tell me, but my mother had made him promise. Um,
Mm.
so,
So was
um,
he Swedish then?
no, he was a
So,
very well known scientist who did a lot of work in Sweden as a scientist and had a lot of contacts in Sweden.
mm,
So it was really through him that was the reason my mother decided to go there.
and leave you there.
Yeah, and leave me there. Yeah. So I was also, in the middle of my composing career, and I found that I would compose a lot of works. Uh, I'm a kind of composer that really writes about herself, not in an egotistical way, but as here I am living in this world. I'm a mother, I'm an artist, I'm living in Philadelphia, all these things are going on. What is my perspective? What is my authentic voice that I have at this moment? And so a lot of the work that I was doing in therapy started sort of leaking into my music. So I have a piece called Dark Child Sings, which is a cello quartet. And that is really about that sad, dark child in me that was grieving for a lost Swedish mother.
Mm.
I have a big orchestra piece called "In the Darkness I Find a Face. It Is Mine." So I was writing all this music, and it wasn't as if I was trying to write a story in my music, but it was as if I was holding that idea of, let's say, the dark child as I was composing that and just thinking about it, being with that as I was writing my music. So I would say it was about 10 years that I was writing music about my past.
Mm. So have you managed to sort of had the conversation now with your mother and your father about how they felt at the time, why they did it at the time? Because I think that's one thing I've seen over the years that people that are adopted, one of the biggest questions they ask is, why did you leave me? Have you had that conversation?
I have. I want to say that sometimes the reasons they make you understand what's going on, but I do think that the reasons why it happened and the effect on you, um, I wouldn't want to not process my anger and my sorrow and grief because I was feeling like I had to take care of my mom. Oh, poor mom! How could she have
Mm.
gone through this? So I really hold her story in one hand and my reaction in the other, so I don't confuse them. So I treat them as separate. I think particularly women tend to give up their pain so they can tend to the person who hurt them. They feel
Mm.
badly for them, they understand, they want to forgive, and then they kind of shortchange themselves. So my process was to keep those things separate. So I could have compassion with my mother, but I could also say this really profoundly injured me as a child,
Mm.
regardless of the reasons. You know, honestly, in the beginning, she was making the best choice that she could. However, and in the 50s and 60s, parents didn't talk to their children. They didn't ask them, "Oh, so how are you feeling? Oh, let's
Yeah.
talk about your adoption." They didn't. There wasn't language. And that's not their fault necessarily.
Mm.
However, the effect is still scarring. So you can't get away just because nobody talked about it then doesn't mean that the child isn't traumatized.
Yeah.
So they're two separate things. And I think the way my mother um, processed this deception, I don't think it was a deception in the beginning, but I think eventually it became a deception.
Mm.
And her inability to really come to understand that she might have hurt someone, um, I think it changed her. I think she became, I don't like the word narcissist because I think words like descriptors like that sometimes can
Mm.
sway you it relieves one of the complexity of the situation. But she didn't want anybody to think badly for her, and she was going to defend her turf.
Mm.
And that became more and more of an issue where she didn't want me to tell my brothers and sisters. When I got married, I wanted to invite both my mother and my father's family, and she wanted me to have two separate weddings, sort of things like that. So she became and the truth is, I think what a great lesson to think about that when we have something in our lives that we are not honestly dealing with, sometimes that can almost become like a Frankenstein that then
Mm.
controls us.
Yeah.
And
Becomes that secretive monster that
I think so.
you'd think, and quite more often than not, wrongly, that because the truth actually comes out,
Yes.
that secret you've been keeping hasn't been that bad when the truth
Right.
is known.
Right.
But
Right.
it's that perception in people's minds that their dirty little secret will
Right.
damage them, and they think that people will think really really badly of them when
Right.
the truth comes out. When 99 times out of 10, people don't really care.
Exactly. Now, I always believe in privacy. Everyone has the right to
Yeah.
privacy. I really believe that. On the other hand, a secret about someone in your life, now, sometimes it's not helpful to tell. It depends upon the secret.
Yeah.
I think in
Obviously.
a married couple, maybe there was an indiscretion that happened a long time ago. I'm not someone who can say honesty is always the best thing. However, this this affected my entire family, my brothers and my sisters, and
Mm.
my stepfather very deeply. Um, and it took me a long time to stop being so angry. And I did a lot of forgiveness practice, which I want to say people have a lot of different ideas about forgiveness. Some people don't like it. Sometimes now the word is radical acceptance.
Mm.
I I don't really know. My experience is that my anger was a huge burden that I was carrying around every day for myself. And I wanted to get out from under that weight. So I decided that when I was walking my dog, and I write about this in my book, that I would say, I forgive you to all the people that I was angry at. Um, and the best part is I didn't have to mean it. And I think that was really important because I don't think I was in a place where I could really mean it. But I was just going to say it. I forgive you. I hate you, but I forgive you. Okay, I forgive you. I'm really angry. I forgive you. And I had a big dog who was very muscular and would kind of drag me through Philadelphia. And it was hot. And, Philadelphia is a big city and there's a lot of garbage. And so I'd be walking after this dog, holding onto the leash, and I would start with myself. I forgive myself, and I'd forgive my little daughter, and then I'd forgive my husband, and I'd forgive my friends, and then I'd forgive my colleagues and my family. And then finally, like 10 or 15 minutes later, I was forgiving my mother and also my stepfather for the way that he handled things. And I was just spitting nails. I was so angry. And then I'd go home, and the next morning I'd do it again. And I think I must have terrorized that neighborhood. They must have said, "Oh my gosh, here she comes. That crazy woman
Mrs.
who's
Angry.
yelling." Yes. And what I noticed after months of doing this is that I could be with my mother and stepfather. My stepfather was particularly dense sometimes, and he would start talking, and I didn't have to leave the room. I could stay and listen. And then months later, it was Christmas and they gave me a present and I was able to say thank you. And I think that forgiveness for me, I write in my book, it brought me to kindness. I could be kind to them. It didn't restore the relationship or, like a fairy godmother,
Yeah.
make everything better.
So
Because a
how
lot
did
of
it affect? How did it affect your, I guess, half brothers?
my brother, half brothers and sisters, I
Yeah.
think the seeds to my mother's sort of inability to live by the truth also was part of their relationship too. So it wasn't as if she just did it to me in this sort of encapsulated way, but I can't quite express it, but they felt it was very resonant for them in their relationship with her too. So, and that they hadn't known either. I think that was
Yeah.
hard on them.
So when did it finally come out that uh, your mother was your mother in the family?
Um,
When did the family find out that she'd been carrying this secret for years?
you know, um, not the entire family, so the relatives, not until I published the book. So um, she died last year. She was 99. And she really hadn't ever publicly claimed me. Uh, Certainly, a lot of the relatives, the cousins and aunts and uncles didn't know. Uh, so, um, and I didn't feel like I could tell them. I didn't have a lot of relationships with them either. But really, it was when I wrote this book that I said, "This is who I am." I name myself. And I think the idea of being named for a child is really important. You are my daughter.
Yeah.
Uh, and she could have easily taken me aside at some point and said, "Hey, I've got something to tell you. We can't really talk about this publicly because I worry about how it would affect my job. But you are my daughter."
And she never
So
did.
she certainly went. I was 21 and I told her, "Hey, I know." She said, "Of
Yeah.
course, you're my daughter." But she also thought, she imagined that I always knew she was my biological mother. She said, "Oh, well, you always knew." And I said, "No, I
You
didn't." She said,
didn't.
"Oh, yes, you did." So, kind of revisionist history. And I want to say on her behalf, she was an amazing teacher. She was a wonderful person in so many ways. And I think we have to be careful when we talk about people who have hurt us, because it's only one part of them. It's not the
Yeah.
whole picture. People are very complicated. Um, and she certainly was an amazing teacher. She was a wonderful mother in terms of traveling. We lived in many countries together. We lived in Turkey for 3 years. We lived in Germany for a year. We lived in Israel and Santiago, Chile. She loved the arts. Oh, she was always taking us to England to see the Royal Shakespeare Company. And we were living in Germany. That was like the treat, the Christmas treat. Um, there are so many good things about her.
Hmm.
Um, and again, I try to hold those in one hand and hold the difficult parts in another so I don't mix them up.
Yeah. So did that enable you to be sort of bilingual or multilingual, living in all these different countries, or were you sort
Well,
of in the American bubble?
actually, my parents, my mother and stepfather, were visiting professors, so we never were in the bubble. So they taught at the University of Würzburg or the University of Tel Aviv. So we lived in the neighborhoods. I did learn fluent German. So my first language was Swedish, and I quickly replaced that with English. And then I learned fluent German, which I've forgotten by now. And I actually learned Hebrew. I was pretty fluent in Hebrew when I was living there. Um, and I had gone in Germany. I actually went to a German high school, a music high school, which I loved. I had a great year in Germany.
So whereabouts in Germany?
In Würzburg,
Oh, Würzburg,
uh, yeah,
Volkswagen town. Yes.
yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's where they build a Volkswagens in Volkswagen.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. They have a great musical high school there, musikalische gymnasium that I went to, and yeah.
So bring us right up to date then. Where are you? Where are you today? What's? I mean, you've written your book.
I've
So
written my book.
where can people find the book? More
Right.
importantly,
Well, you can find it on Amazon. That's the best place to get it. And you can buy it in a hardback or softbound, or the
is it
kind that come in a
audible?
Kindle. It is not audible. I should make an audible version with my music. It talks a lot about my musical process and how I relate to music, why I compose, what's important to me. You can also stream my music. I have been commissioned and performed and have quite a few recordings out. Deutsche Grammophon, Albany Records. I have a brand new digital release called Hymn of the Universe that just came out, and a CD that will be coming out in the spring.
Hmm.
And you can always contact me on my website, which is easy to remember, tinadavidson.com. And so it's really easy to contact me.
Well, you find all that down in the description. So I'll put all those links to the book and the music down in the description. If you'd like to go and find those, you'll be most welcome, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Tina, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, that's been fascinating, absolutely
Yeah.
fascinating, of a story of secrecy and deceit throughout our whole life.
Well,
And
yes, and I want to say, I was seriously depressed at many times in my life until I was in my 30s, and that was a time where there wasn't any drugs. Um,
mm,
and I want to say that I have been completely free of depression in the last 30 years. It is worth doing that work of meeting your grief, your trauma, your pain, your suffering, and however you do it. If you're doing therapy, or good friends are helping you, or your your church pastor, or you're doing a lot of meditation, or dancing, or walking, or art therapy. I think there are many ways to heal yourself, and it's so worth it. It really
Mm.
is.
Yeah,
I have so much more
absolutely.
time in the day these days. I really I have an amazing life, and feel very grateful to that willingness to walk with my pain rather than bury it.
Yes. I think it's always good to get it out, and once it's out, then it's a lot easier to deal with.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Tina.
Oh, my total pleasure.
Wow, that is another amazing story. So if you've gone through anything like that in your life, then there is a way through it. There is a way out of it. There is a way to overcome it. So you can find all Tina's uh, stuff down in the description. And until next time, thank you so much. And TTFN, ta ta for now.